I stood before the old mirror in the small room. The gentle spring light seeped through the thin sheer curtains, spreading softly like a memory across the floor. Today was a special day. My grandson Samuel's wedding, my son. My heart beat a little faster, not from nervousness, but from a joy mixed with anticipation. This rented apartment, with its faded walls and the scent of old wood, had been my home for 12 years. It was small, but here I had nurtured Samuel's dreams, and today I wanted to witness the happiest moment of his life. I opened the closet. There hung the dark blue dress I had carefully placed there last week, perfectly ironed. I had long hesitated between many colors. White was too bright, black too cold, but dark blue was ideal, formal and elegant. I had chosen it because I wanted my son to be proud of his mother when he saw her sitting in the front row. I didn't want to embarrass him by looking too old-fashioned or flashy. On the small table next to the mirror lay a pale lipstick, which I had bought after a month of hesitation. I usually didn't wear lipstick. The last time was probably years ago at a parent-teacher conference for Samuel. But today, I wanted to shine a little brighter. Each movement was slow and deliberate, as if creating a perfect picture for the moment I would sit in the front row and watch Samuel step into his new life. I imagined his eyes when he would see me. Perhaps he would smile and say, "Mom, you look beautiful." The low-heeled shoes stood neatly at the foot of the bed. I had cleaned them thoroughly the night before to ensure no scratch marred their elegance. I walked to the old wooden desk, where a small photo of Samuel as a child stood. This child used to cry all night because he was afraid of the dark, forcing me to sit by his bed and tell stories until he fell asleep. Now, this child was about to become someone's husband. The photo was taken when he was 3 years old, the year my husband Lucas died, leaving Samuel and me in a world full of challenges. I still remembered vividly how Lucas would lull Samuel to sleep every night with a little jazz tune. Samuel would ask his father to sing it over and over until he fell asleep on his chest. Perhaps that was the last time the three of us truly knew peace. I picked up the photo, gently stroked the wooden frame, and whispered, "Our son is getting married. I'm so looking forward to sitting in the front row and seeing you beaming with happiness." These words were not just a wish, but a confirmation that I was still an important part of Samuel's story. Yet, in this moment of peace, I felt a small pang of worry. Samuel had been in less contact with me in recent months. His calls were short, his messages just a few words. I told myself he was busy, a young attorney building his career and preparing for his wedding. I didn't want to bother him, but I still hoped to meet his fiancée, Charlotte, and talk like family. A few weeks ago, I had called him and asked, "Can I meet Charlotte before the wedding, my dear?" His voice on the phone sounded a little uncomfortable. "Maybe later, Mom. Her family is a bit particular. I want everything to be perfect." Those words stung a little, but I pushed them aside, thinking he was just stressed. I looked at the clock, only a few hours until the wedding. I checked my handbag again to make sure everything was ready, the handkerchief, some change, and the card I had written for Samuel and Charlotte. In it, I had written, "I wish you eternal joy. I am always here if you need me." Writing these lines brought tears to my eyes, but I didn't allow myself to cry. Today was a happy day, and I wanted that joy to be complete. As I opened the door, I ran into Mrs. Davison, the neighbor from downstairs, who was watering petunias on her balcony. She squinted against the sun, then chuckled softly. "My goodness, you look so chic today, Harper," she said. "Is there something special going on?" I couldn't hide my smile, a smile that was both shy and happy. I gripped my bag tighter and replied in a quiet but excited voice, "My son is getting married today. I got up early to get ready. I don't want to be late. I don't want to miss a moment of his big day." Mrs. Davison nodded, her gaze softening. I continued in a slow voice, as if whispering to myself, "I can't stop thinking about the moment he walks into the venue in his suit, waiting for the bride. I've imagined how he'll smile, how he'll look at his future wife, just like Lucas looked at me so many years ago. You know, it took me almost an hour to choose the color of this lipstick. But I think today the groom's mother needs to shine a little, don't you?" Mrs. Davison smiled and placed her hand on mine. "I'm sure your son will be very proud," she said. I nodded, trying to keep the smile on my face, but in my heart, I only hoped that everything would turn out as I had imagined all these years. I sat on the bus, clutching my small handbag on my lap. Every gentle jolt of the vehicle intensified the pain in my abdomen. A dull ache that had lingered for 10 years since the liver transplant. I clung to the seat, tried to sit upright, and took deep breaths to maintain my composure. Today was Samuel's wedding day, and I didn't want any pain to mar the joy. The seat beside me was empty, for which I was grateful. Not because I didn't want to talk to someone, but because I wasn't sure I could hide my feelings. If someone had asked me, "Where are you going?" I would probably have replied, "To watch my son get married." I was so happy I wanted to tell the whole world. We passed a bus stop. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. I reached out and gently wiped the dirty pain. At that moment, my gaze fell upon my own reflection, and beside it, like a ghost, I saw an image of myself 30 years ago. Young me, sitting next to a hospital bed, holding Samuel, who was just 3 years old. Lucas, my husband, had died less than a week earlier. A sudden heart attack, unexpected for everyone. I remembered vividly the moment I placed my hand on his cold chest, silently bowing my head while Samuel clung to my sleeve, sobbing, "Mommy, where's Daddy?" I couldn't answer. And from that day on, I understood that from now on, I would have to live alone, protect and raise Samuel. The first few years were not easy. I worked 2 jobs. In the mornings, I cleaned at a hospital. In the afternoons, at an accounting office near our home. At night, I often didn't get home until after 11 p.m., when Samuel had long been asleep. I quietly reheated leftovers, ate quickly, and sat at the table to write scholarship applications for my son. I begged for every penny of tuition fees from charity organizations, single mother support programs, and local churches. Some days I had to walk almost 3 miles to the financial aid office because I couldn't afford a bus ticket. Samuel grew up in a world without expensive toys or new clothes for every season. The first coat I bought him in 2nd grade, I tried to make it last until 4th grade. I patched it, sewed it, stuffed it with cotton. Every evening, I turned the sleeves up to see how much longer they would hold. I still wore my old sweater from when I worked as a receptionist over 10 years ago. I never complained, because I always thought that what I gave was an investment in my son's future. But it seemed God always knew how to bring misfortune to the poor. When Samuel, then only 16, developed chronic hepatitis B, the doctor said, "His liver condition is deteriorating rapidly, and without a transplant, he might not survive." I didn't hesitate for a moment. I immediately got tested, and when it turned out I was compatible, I went under the knife and had a part of my liver removed to save my son. The operation was successful, but I had to take regular medication to control the pain and complications. The medication was expensive, and with the income from my cleaning job at the hospital, I often had to choose whether to buy medication for myself or food for Samuel. Most of the time, I chose Samuel. He needed the food more than I did. After the operation, the pain constantly returned, but I gritted my teeth because my son's smile was the strongest medicine I had. However, Samuel began to change then. He followed fashion trends and constantly compared himself to his friends who had wealthy parents. Once, Samuel insisted that I buy him designer sneakers like the ones his friends wore at school. "You know, today the whole class was talking about the new Air Jordans. I'm the only one who still wears these cheap shoes," he said in a stubborn voice. I quietly sat down on a chair, took a towel, and wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Do you want me to wear these worn-out shoes? If you don't buy me these sneakers, I'm not going to school. I don't want the whole class to laugh at me." I looked into my son's eyes, saw his desire for acceptance, and my heart softened. I worked extra shifts at night, even took on laundry jobs for a nearby family, just to earn enough money for those sneakers. Every penny I earned was sweat-soaked. But I thought, if the sneakers made Samuel happy, it would be worth it. I worked overtime for a month, skipped my usual medication, the ones that helped control the pain after the liver transplant, just to buy my son a pair of shoes he liked. At night, when I came home, I lay on my side because I didn't dare to breathe deeply. Yet, I always thought if Samuel is happy, so am I. And then one day, I collapsed. I was cleaning the third floor of the hospital when I became dizzy and everything spun. I forced myself to walk a few more steps, but my vision blurred. People said I collapsed like a felled tree. I woke up in the emergency room, staring at the familiar ceiling. The first person I called was Samuel. Trembling, I held the phone and dialed his number. After the third ring, he picked up, and I heard background noise that told me he was in a busy place. "Mom, what's wrong?" I said softly, trying to suppress the pain in my chest. "I'm in the hospital. Can you come?" There was a pause, then a curt reply. "If you can still call me, you're probably fine. Are there doctors there?"
"I'm Busse."
I knew he was at a friend's birthday party, because I later saw the photos on social media. I knew the laughter on the other end of the line wasn't for me. It was the sound of a life to which I no longer belonged. Then came the year he graduated. I thought all the struggles had been worth it. But then Samuel got into a legal battle. A partner accused him of breaching a contract in a case that lasted months. If he lost the lawsuit, he could lose his law license and even accumulate hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I had no choice. I sold the only house I had left. The house where Lucas and I had lived, where we had celebrated Samuel's first birthday, where a rose bush grew behind the porch. I remember standing before the notary's table, my hand trembling as I held the pen to sign the sales document. The real estate agent asked if I was sure. I just nodded, because if I didn't, my son would lose everything. After that, I rented a small apartment, the apartment where I still live today. Every month, I lived frugally, from electricity to water, never daring to buy food out. When Samuel graduated, I hoped just once that he would remember everything. I gave him my wedding ring and Lucas's, the last things I had left from my youth, the only memories I had preserved. I told him I had kept them all these years, not because they were valuable, but because they were a memory of your father's love. If you need them, you can keep them. Since Samuel graduated and started working as an attorney, his schedule became incredibly packed. Often, I only received a brief message, "Busy, call later." But those calls rarely came. I comforted myself by thinking he was building his career, working hard as a lawyer, who wouldn't be busy. He often said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'm doing this for the future. Later, you won't have to do anything." I had heard that sentence for many years and always believed him. But gradually, I began to feel that I was being pushed out of his life. Step by step, silently but clearly. When he announced his engagement to Charlotte, I was genuinely happy. During a short video call, Samuel held up her hand to show me the sparkling diamond ring on her finger. I could only see a shy smile and a cascade of blonde hair. They said they were busy with wedding preparations and would send me the details later. I kept nodding, my eyes full of emotion. After that, I called Samuel myself. I think I should meet Charlotte before the wedding, just to talk like family. After all, I'll be her mother-in-law. I heard Samuel sigh on the other end of the line, followed by a hesitant voice, completely unlike my son's, who had hugged me in the schoolyard on graduation day.
"Mom, don't push it meeting Charlotte now mich komplikate things."
I chuckled softly, trying to hide the sting in my heart. I just want to understand the person who will share your life better. But if it makes you uncomfortable, I won't force you. Samuel didn't answer. There was only a faint okay. Then the call ended with a long tone that hurt my ear, as if someone had slammed a door. I placed the phone on the table. My fingers still rested on the screen, as if I didn't want to let go. At that moment, I just wanted to maintain a small connection, even if it was silent, between my son and me.
No message came, no apology, just silence. Absolute silence.
I stood up and silently made myself a cup of tea.
The water boiled in the heat up kettle.
I still used the same tea bags. Not because I liked them, but because I was used to them. The scent of the tea spread faintly, but it didn't alleviate the emptiness that silently expanded in my chest. I placed the cup on the table, a small dining table with only 2 chairs. But since Samuel had moved out, I left his place as it was. Every morning, I still set 2 plates when I prepared dinner. I still looked at the empty chair. Not because I didn't notice he was gone, but because I didn't want to believe he wouldn't come back. People say that when children grow up, parents must learn to let go. But no one taught me to let go of the child I had loved every day, at every meal, every night. How do you let go of someone you've invested every penny in? How do you let go of someone for whom, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I still unconsciously reached for the small bed where he used to sleep? But a week later, Mrs. Davison casually told me that Samuel had celebrated an engagement party at a luxurious restaurant in the city. She had seen the photos on social media. Samuel in a black tuxedo, Charlotte in a flawless white silk gown, tightly embraced under golden lights, without me. Not a word. I didn't envy them the lights, the champagne, or the dresses. I just didn't understand why they hadn't told me. The next day, I called Samuel again. The phone rang, then the answering machine picked up. A few minutes later, I received a message. "Why did you call?" "I'm in a meeting." I replied, "I just wanted to know if you're okay." No answer came. I didn't call again until the next week. This time, Samuel picked up. His voice was neither angry nor happy, just empty. "Mom, I'm serious. Don't call without warning. I'm very busy." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Yes, I understand. But I want to ask you something." "Say it quickly, Mom. I have a client meeting in 5 minutes." I hesitated briefly, then said very softly, "Could you bring your future wife home sometime? I just want to talk." On the other end of the line, I heard a dry laugh, a sound that made my hair stand on end. "Mom, your rented apartment is like a dump. Don't you see that? I can't bring anyone there. Don't mess things up for me." I thought I had misheard, but I wasn't speechless. It felt as if my chest was tightening. I had given him a part of my liver. Now he was stabbing a knife into me. For the first time in my life, I couldn't say anything. Not a word, not a sigh. I hung up. From then on, Samuel didn't call anymore. The messages were just okay, good, or simply busy. I felt like a stranger, an unknown woman who had given him life, but now had no access to his life. The bus stopped, I got off, and my low-heeled shoes touched the sidewalk. The pain from the old surgery flared up again, but I gritted my teeth and stood tall. I looked into the distance, where the resort hosting the wedding appeared, with its lush trees and sparkling lights. I imagined myself walking in my perfectly ironed dark blue dress, with a radiant smile, and Samuel embracing me, saying he was proud I was there. As the resort came into view, I stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by its splendor. White banquet tables, covered with silk fabrics, white floral arrangements with silver accents, and the melodic sounds of a string quartet floated through the air. I smoothed my dark blue dress and took a deep breath to gather more confidence. I imagined walking through the door, sitting in the front row, and watching Samuel and Charlotte exchange their vows. Smoothing my dress was a small ritual that helped me prepare for this extravagant venue, even though deep down I knew I didn't belong here. But as I approached the door, a security guard in a black suit with a serious face blocked my way. "I'm sorry, you're not on the list," he said in a calm but cold voice. I was stunned, as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over my head. "I'm the groom's mother," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was beating faster. The guard looked at me emotionlessly, pulled out an iPad, and quickly scrolled through the list. "Your name isn't here," he said indifferently. I froze. My hand gripped my handbag so tightly that it trembled. It was as if a knife was cutting through my expectations, making me feel like a stranger at my own son's wedding. I pulled out my phone and, with trembling hands, dialed Samuel's number. It rang, but no one answered. I called again, this time desperately, still no answer. Then a message appeared on the screen. "Mom, don't make a scene. Today is an important day for me."
I read it again and again.
Every word was like a dagger to the heart. Samuel, my son, for whom I had donated a part of my liver, sold my house and my wedding ring to help him, was now telling me, "Don't cause a scandal on the happiest day of my life." I stood there at the entrance of the resort, in my carefully ironed dark blue dress, which was now stained with dust, and a feeling of loneliness enveloped me. Reading the message, I recognized the painful truth. I was not welcome here. From a distance, through the iron gate, I heard lively voices, laughter, and Samuel's voice echoing through a microphone. I stepped closer, trying to look through the gate, and saw him standing on the stage in an elegant black suit, with a radiant smile on his face. He delivered a speech with the gentle voice of an experienced attorney. "I want to thank everyone who is here today, especially my mother, who has always supported me from afar. She is currently living overseas for work and couldn't be here, but I know she sends us her blessings." The audience applauded, but I felt the blood drain from my veins. Samuel had lied. I wasn't a mother on a mission in Europe. I was standing here, less than 20 yards from my son. But he had just declared to the entire hall that I didn't exist. He had not only removed me from the guest list but also erased me from his story by making me a mother living abroad, to hide the truth about the small rented apartment and the old coat I had worn for 10 years. I stood there, my eyes clouded with tears, but I didn't let them fall. Through the gate, I saw the guests in their magnificent clothes, the wine glasses glittering under the lights. Samuel, my son, laughed and spoke with Charlotte, without noticing that I, the mother who had dedicated her entire life to him, stood outside the gate, excluded like someone who didn't belong. I was confronted with Samuel's blatant deception, who had preferred the perfect image of his wife's family to my presence. The mother he had once promised a good life to was now undesirable. Through the green foliage lining the entrance of the Grand Cypress Resort, I clearly heard a man's voice echo through the loudspeakers. It was a deep, resonant voice full of self-confidence, the voice of Mr. Peterson, Charlotte's father, and as everyone tacitly acknowledged, Samuel's new father. "Let me warmly welcome our wonderful son-in-law, Samuel Davies. A strong, composed man, and most importantly, someone who will offer our daughter the life of her dreams." The applause boomed through the entire grounds, even and orchestrated like the sound of a perfectly tuned consensus. I heard the clinking of plates against glasses, the laughter of people, the clinking of wine glasses. Everything was perfect, except for me. Quietly, I retreated behind a large tree trunk. From there, I could see the garden decorated with white roses and pastel pink flowers. I saw Samuel standing there, hand in hand with Charlotte. The golden lights shimmered in her hair. He nodded slightly, as if the praise was self-evident, something he deserved. Mr. Peterson continued, "Our Charlotte has always dreamed of a loving partner, a warm home, and a wonderful mother-in-law, and today she has all three." I wasn't sure if I was still breathing. A wonderful mother-in-law. Who were they talking about? At the end of the lawn, I saw a woman. She wore a pearlescent dress, her hair in a high bun, a pearl necklace around her neck. She stood next to Samuel, as if she had raised him from childhood. She placed her hand on his shoulder and smiled tenderly while everyone took photos. A photographer raised his camera. "Very good, mother of the groom and bride" smile. No one corrected him. No one turned to me. No one called my name. I felt my body go numb, as if the wind around me had stopped blowing. My heart, once torn for my son, now quietly shrank in my chest. This man, who had just called my son part of his esteemed family, had never seen me holding Samuel's hand all night in the hospital when he had a high fever. He had never seen me sell my wedding ring so Samuel could open his first office. He had never seen me sighing, looking at my prescriptions, and then folding them up to save money for sneakers for my son, just because he was afraid his friends might laugh at him. I, who washed his socks in cold water in winter, was the one who had no place at the ceremony today. I lowered my gaze and looked at my hands. Worn, rough hands with brown spots that the years had imprinted. I gently stroked my ring finger, where my wedding ring with Lucas had once been. Samuel was now wearing a new ring, but he was no longer looking in my direction. I didn't cry, I couldn't. All that remained was a dull, long, indescribable pain. I came home when it was already dark. The streetlights blurred in the fog. When I entered the old apartment, I didn't immediately turn on the light. I stood in the darkness, my back leaning against the newly closed door. My ears still echoed with the music, the applause, and Samuel's voice calling another woman Mom. I took off my low-heeled shoes. My feet were covered in blisters from the long walk. I didn't change clothes, didn't prepare dinner. I sat down on the chair and stared at the handbag in front of me, which still held the gift I hadn't delivered today, along with the invoices and copies of the wedding contracts Samuel had sent me for review. I had no intention of opening them again, but something compelled me to. Perhaps it was the last shred of pride in my heart. Perhaps it was the pain that had crossed all boundaries. I switched on the desk lamp and pulled the folder from my bag. The first page was the invoice from the catering service at the lakeside restaurant. The total amounted to almost $35,000. The person who had paid was Harper Davies. I froze. I remembered signing a check as a deposit for the planners. Samuel had said they needed quick confirmation to reserve the date. At the time, I suspected nothing. I trusted my son. I believed he would pay me back. But as I now flipped through each page, I saw 5 more contracts in my name. For the lavender flower service, even for the dress Charlotte's mother would wear, worth $3,500. I couldn't remember signing all of them, but the signature was mine. Clear and scrolled in the corner of each page. I opened my bank account on my phone. My heart raced as I saw the unusually high credit card payments from the past 2 months. A payment of $10,000 to the wine supplier, $250 to the lighting team, and most notably, $3,500 transferred to an upscale fashion boutique called Evelyn's Bridal Boutique. I clicked on the transaction details.
Note: Dress for E. Petersen. E steht for Evelyn Petersen, Charlottes Mutter.
I sat upright, my hand trembling, and reopened the old emails Samuel had sent me. A series of messy emails appeared, and then I saw the subject, forwarded. Please do not put your name on the documents. I opened it. Inside was an email between Samuel and a wedding planner. Let my mother sign the basic contracts. She won't read the fine print. We'll use her card for the deposits. But don't let her name appear publicly anywhere.
Charlotte dus entwand a provincial Mutter to ruin the wedding's image. I read it again. And ten again.
She won't read the fine print.
Charlotte dus entwand a provincial Mutter to ruin the image.
I felt as if I had been stripped bare and left standing in the cold wind. Not because I was insulted, but because I had been used and then discarded like a financial tool. All the months and years I had lived frugally, skipped medication, cut coupons, just to maintain a little dignity, had now become the silent support of a perfect dream to which I was deliberately denied access. I sat there in silence for a few minutes, not crying, but a storm raged in my head. Then I stood up, no longer slowly. I opened the cabinet and took out the old document box where I kept contracts, receipts, and credit card statements. I pulled out the account numbers and called every service provider who bore my name. Hello, this is Harper Davies. I am the person who signed the catering contract for the wedding at the Grand Cypress Resort. I want to cancel the evening event. Reason: misuse of personal information. The employee's voice stammered, but I continued, the wedding took place this morning. The evening event has not yet begun. According to clause number 8, I have the right to cancel if the user of the service is not the person stated in the contract. I want to confirm the cancellation of everything. Wine, food, service, sound, and lighting. I made 4 such calls, and within 2 hours, all parties sent emails confirming the contract dissolution, termination of services, and refund of the deposit to my card. I leaned back in the chair and took a deep breath. No one knew what I had just done.
No slamming doors, no confrontation, no tears.
Just a mother pushed to her limits, quietly reclaiming what had been stolen from her. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. I made tea, opened my laptop, and wrote, not to beg or explain. I wrote a short article, about 600 words, titled, Who Really Paid for This $1 Million Wedding? I didn't sign it with my name. I just included a photo of a part of the invoice, the small corner with my signature, and an excerpt from the internal email Samuel had sent, don't let her name appear anywhere. Charlotte doesn't want a provincial mother to ruin the image. I sent the article to the Women's Interest section of an online publication that had previously published anonymous articles by single mothers. I didn't expect it to be published. But I wanted someone, somewhere in the world, to know that I was present at my son's wedding in a way they would never dare to acknowledge, but also couldn't deny. I closed the laptop. I poured myself more tea. Yesterday I stood at the edge of a wedding. Today I stood up. Not to destroy, but to remember that I am not a shadow. I am the root upon which everything was built. I came home when it was already dark. The streetlights blurred in the fog. When I entered the old apartment, I didn't immediately turn on the lights. I stood in the darkness, my back leaning against the newly closed door. My ears still echoed with the music, the applause, and Samuel's voice calling another woman Mom. I took off my low-heeled shoes. My feet were covered in blisters from the long walk. I didn't change clothes, didn't prepare dinner. I sat down on the chair and stared at the handbag in front of me. I knew I had flipped the final switch, quietly, without shouting. For them, it was all like an unexpected accident. But for me, it was just the result of a series of decisions Samuel himself had made. And now, as I sat on the wooden chair in my small kitchen, preparing myself a cup of hot tea and silently eating a piece of hard bread, all the images of the chaos at the resort were just a ripple in my heart, until I got the first call from Mrs. Davison. "Harper, my God, did you hear what happened tonight?" I placed the teacup on the table and replied in a calm voice, "I heard they had some organizational problems." She lowered her voice, as if afraid someone might overhear her on the phone. Problems that led to the entire evening event being cancelled. Some of my friends from the dance club have acquaintances who were invited to the wedding. They say the string quartet left at 6:30 p.m. The wine was taken back before it was even opened. The tablecloths were removed in the middle of the celebration. The bride cried incessantly, and Samuel. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady.
What about Samuel?
He screamed in the middle of the garden in front of the guests. That was my mother. Why is she so cruel? People said he looked terrible. I said nothing. Mrs. Davison sighed. I thought you didn't deserve to hear that. Should I come over? No, thank you, I replied. I'm fine. But that night, I was not fine, because less than an hour later, I saw my name appearing on social media. Samuel had posted a status on his personal page. I remember every word, every punctuation mark. There are some people, not even their own mother, who can bless the happiness of others without marking anyone, without photos, but enough to open the floodgates for hundreds of comments that inundated the net like a broken dam. What kind of mother is so heartless? Ruining her own son's wedding, that's truly unbelievable. No wonder Samuel didn't invite her. Typical toxic mother. A post shared from an account about married life read, "$1 million wedding destroyed because the biological mother is jealous of her new daughter-in-law." They didn't know my name. But within half a day, someone found a photo of Samuel at university. A photo where I was hugging him on graduation day, smiling so widely my eyes crinkled. Under the photo, people commented, "Is this the mother who ruined the wedding? She doesn't look poor or shabby at all. Why would she do that? A mother who can't let go of her son. Poor bride." I read every line, not understanding which part of the story people were fabricating I was in. I was speechless. After years of raising my son, I now had to read how people called me a toxic mother, guided by the words of the son who had once said I was his whole world. I was just a toxic mother, a jealous woman, a shameless party pooper. I blocked my personal account after receiving almost 50 messages. Some from strangers, others from Samuel's old schoolmates for whom I used to cook when they met at our house. Someone asked, "Why did you do that to Samuel?" Another wrote curtly, "You disappointed me." And someone, I think it was Charlotte's best friend, sent a photo of the unfinished wedding celebration with the caption, "Look, you made her cry.
Are you proud now?"
I put the phone away and didn't open it again, but the words didn't fall silent. They echoed in my head like splinters that couldn't be removed. Every word, every punctuation mark carved another line into my self-esteem. I sat in the old room where I used to sew all the buttons for Samuel when he started first grade, where I boiled water to wash his feet after snowy winter days, where I imagined one day sitting there and seeing my son beaming with happiness with the person he loved, and knowing that everything I had sacrificed was worth it. But now, I was the one considered an enemy. No one knew what I had done, and those who knew preferred to forget it. The next morning, I went out and walked a little to the small farmer's market at the end of the street. A quiet place where people greeted each other with smiles instead of cell phone screens. An older woman selling bread recognized me and smiled. "Mrs. Davies, I read an article online yesterday. You wrote it, didn't you? I was silent for a moment, then nodded. The old woman looked at me with different eyes than those on the internet. You're not cruel. You're just a mother, and sometimes a mother has to speak her mind. I smiled without answering. I just felt a little relieved. Maybe many would continue to say all sorts of things about me. Maybe Samuel would never apologize. Maybe Charlotte would forever think I was a blemish on her wedding day. I started the first morning after the incident by opening all the windows. Sunlight flooded the room, soft like the touch of an old friend. The wedding music was no longer heard in the distance, nor was the buzzing of the phone with accusatory messages. Only a light breeze and the rustling of leaves outside on the balcony. A sound I had never paid attention to because I was too busy listening to every word of my son. I walked through the apartment with a large trash bag in hand. Today, I didn't just want to dust, but to clean everything that had held me captive in the past. The shirt Samuel had worn at his graduation, which I had kept like a treasure, was now carefully folded and placed in a donation bag. A few boxes of cards, handwritten letters I had never sent, birthday wishes, apologies, even unfinished sentences like, "If you need me, I'm here." I collected everything, packed it into a box, and sealed it with tape. I didn't burn them, didn't tear them up. They were a part of me, but they no longer belonged to my present. I cleaned the picture frame on the wall, a photo of Samuel and me in the park when he was 6 years old. I took it down and replaced it with a painting I had done last year. A sunrise over a grassy hill. Something I had never found time to hang because I always thought this apartment was only temporary. I was waiting for Samuel to take me to a better place. Now I knew, this was my home. The only place where I didn't have to pretend for anyone. I placed a cup of tea on the table, freshly brewed, still hot. The scent of mint spread gently. I sat down and opened my laptop. Not to look for Samuel, not to follow his or Charlotte's latest posts. I opened a new tab and typed the words, "How to create a free personal blog." I named it, The Invisible Mother. I didn't have to become famous. I just had to express myself, because all these years, I had been too silent. I had retreated too much. And if I could still write, still share, then maybe somewhere out there, a mother like me would see that she wasn't alone. My first article began, "I used to think, sacrifice is love. But it turns out that if you don't love yourself, sacrifice only makes you a shadow in someone else's story." I wrote about the wedding without going into detail, without resentment. I told how I had raised a son with all my love, how I thought giving everything was enough. I wrote about the afternoon I was left standing outside the wedding venue, about Samuel's eyes that didn't look in my direction, about the dark blue dress stained with dust, and the gift I hadn't given. And I concluded with the sentence, "I'm not waiting for anyone anymore. Today, I'm setting the table for myself." 2 days later, the first email arrived. A woman named Martha from Nebraska wrote, "I thought I was the only one excluded from my daughter's wedding. Thank you, your article showed me I still have value." Then came the second person, a mother from Florida, a retired teacher from Ohio. Women who seemingly had nothing in common now found empathy through the words of an ordinary mother. My blog didn't attract hundreds of thousands of visitors, but it reached the right people who needed it. And that was enough. I used the few savings I had left, the ones Samuel knew nothing about, to buy some new kitchen utensils, a small cast iron pan, a knife set with duck handles, a small oven I had long dreamed of but always put off because it was unnecessary. I printed a few flyers and wrote them by hand, cooking classes for seniors with Harper every Saturday free. I hung them at the farmer's market, the drugstore, and Mr. Henderson's old bakery. On the first day, 3 people came, Mrs. Davison, a widowed elderly man named Lucas, same name as my late husband, a comforting coincidence, and Teresa, 67, who said she wanted to learn to cook a decent meal for herself for the first time since her daughter moved out. I stood in the kitchen before them, a wooden spoon in hand and a heart full of joy. I told them, today we're not cooking for anyone else, not for husbands, not for children, not for relatives or guests. Today we're cooking for ourselves. When everyone had left, I washed the dishes, wiped the table, and put away the leftovers. The kitchen smelled of roasted bread and carrots with butter. The golden light shimmered on the wall where I had hung a small wooden sign. This place is for the forgotten. I sat at the dining table. In front of me was the food I had prepared. Nothing fancy, just brown rice, steamed vegetables, and some simmered fish. But for the first time in many years, I had cooked it only for myself. I took the spoon, brought the first bite to my mouth. The salty taste was perfect, warm, comforting, nothing special but authentic. I whispered softly, like a declaration, "Mom is no longer a shadow. Today, Mom is cooking the first meal for herself." And for the first time in a long time, I ate without haste, without obligations. I simply ate like someone who knows they deserve to live fully, even if no one calls their name. The early winter rain in this city was not heavy, but steady and cold. I closed the window slightly and pulled back the curtain a little to look at the familiar street. Everything was quiet. The flower shop across the street had closed early. Mrs. Davison was hanging laundry on the balcony on the first floor, and I was about to make myself a cup of ginger tea to warm up on this cold day. I didn't expect Samuel to come back that day. There were 3 knocks on the door, without force, without haste, just in a steady, somewhat hesitant rhythm. I looked through the peephole, and my heart skipped a beat. It was him. Samuel stood there, his coat wrinkled and wet from the rain. His hair fell across his forehead, and his gaze was lost. He was much thinner, even thinner than in college, thinner than I had imagined in my sleepless nights. He brought no flowers, no cake, just an old backpack, casually slung over his shoulder, like a traveler returning from a failed journey. I opened the door without a word. He spoke first, in a hoarse voice, "Mom." I stood still, holding the door firmly, not taking my eyes off him. The wind carried the scent of rain into the house, cooling my shoulders. Samuel lowered his gaze uncomfortably. "I know I have no right to be here, but I have nowhere else to go." I tilted my head, as if listening to a stranger's story. He looked up at me, his eyes red, and for the first time in a long time, he spoke the truth, without embellishment, without inventions. "They found out. Charlotte's family, everything. There's no mother living overseas, no trust fund, nothing." I nodded slightly. It didn't surprise me. I had imagined this would happen, just not when. Samuel continued, his voice breaking. "Her father, Mr. Peterson, called me a fraud, and Charlotte left. She said I embarrassed her family. Mom, everyone has turned their backs on me." I turned silently and slowly dried my hands, still damp from washing dishes, with a towel. The steam from the ginger tea rose gently and warmly from the cup. A stark contrast to the tear-filled eyes of my son before me, the boy I once thought would never turn his back on his mother. Samuel adjusted the strap of his backpack. His voice trembled and became quiet. "Mom, I was wrong. I never thanked you for everything you did for me. I thought if I succeeded, I could buy your love with money, with fame, with a big wedding." He looked up, his eyes red. "But it turns out nothing can replace a mother, and I erased you from the happiest day of my life." The silence stretched between us. Outside, the rain beat on the tin roof like a whisper of the past. Finally, Samuel lowered his voice. "Can you forgive me? Now I only have you." I lifted my head and looked directly into the eyes that were once my whole world. I wasn't angry, not anymore. What was in my heart now was clarity. As clear as the morning sunlight when I started writing the blog. As clear as the hot cup of tea I made myself every morning, and as clear as the answer I carried in my heart since I knew I no longer wanted to wait. I stepped out of the door, pulled my coat over my shoulders, and said in a cold but firm voice, "You chose to erase me from the happiest day of your life. You went on stage and called another woman Mom. You allowed people to pity me because of the lies you invented." I paused, letting each word hang in the air. "Now you have no one left. But I have found myself again." Suddenly, I remembered the day he had a fever and convulsions, clinging to my shirt, screaming "Mommy" in a hoarse voice. And now he stood there again calling me Mom, but no longer out of innocence, but out of desperation. Samuel was silent. His face relaxed, as if trying to accept something he had never thought possible, that his mother could say no. I continued, this time slowly, gently, but with a voice sharp as a knife. You don't have to kneel or cry. I don't hate you, but I spent my whole life loving you until I lost myself.
I valkets vole pas.
Now I'm moving on, but not for you anymore. Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just lowered his head. His shoulders slumped like the boys from years ago who had gotten bad grades, like a man who understood for the first time that his mother was no longer waiting for him at the starting line. I reached out my hand, not to hug him, but to close the door. You should go home too. It's time you learned to love yourself, if you truly want to understand how I did it. The door closed behind me without a sound. I turned around. The tea was still hot. I took it and went into the living room, where the golden light still shimmered gently, where I had hung the small sign with the words, "The mother is no longer invisible." I sat down. I took a deep breath. Not everyone gets a chance to correct mistakes. But not everyone is strong enough to choose forgiveness without returning. And I knew I had forgiven, but I would not return. That Sunday, the sky was as soft as a silk scarf. The sunlight was gentle, not harsh, scattering fine golden rays over the low buildings of the old neighborhood. I woke up earlier than usual, washed my face, put on the beige linen blouse I always saved for special occasions, and began preparing dinner. It wasn't a meal for one person, as usual, but for 8. The people who had been unconditionally by my side, without judging me, without asking anything more of me than to be myself. I stood in the kitchen, turning the old but sturdy cast iron pan. The scent of melting butter over low heat, mixed with onions and mushrooms, filled the small apartment, seeping through the cracks in the wood, the corners of the table, and the old scratches on the wall like a gentle invitation. I cooked my mother's traditional stew, which she always made when there was nothing but potatoes, carrots, and beef bones at home. I added mushrooms and dried herbs that Teresa had brought from her garden. The bread was the one that Lucas, the widower from the cooking class, and I had baked together yesterday. We had laughed loudly as flour flew everywhere and the oven puffed and hissed, as if protesting having to work on the weekend. At 4 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it with a smile I didn't have to force. Mrs. Davison brought a freshly baked apple pie. Mr. Henderson, the baker from down the street, came with a bottle of homemade grape wine. Teresa wore a floral dress and a basket of oranges. Then more came. Melinda from the drugstore, the delivery driver who had once given me a ride in the rain, and an old colleague from the hospital I hadn't seen in over 10 years. No one brought flowers, no one was dressed extravagantly, but everyone brought the most precious thing, their kind presence. The small apartment felt more spacious as laughter filled every corner. We pushed 2 wooden tables together, spread a white tablecloth, and set out plates, spoons, glasses, and bowls, just as I had always done for other special occasions. Only this time, I was the special occasion. Dinner began with a simple appetizer, garlic bread and herb butter. I poured wine into each glass without my hands trembling. When everyone was seated, I stood up, without a microphone, without spotlights, without photographers. Yet, never before had I felt so clearly seen. I raised my glass and said in a gentle but clear voice, "Once, I was banished from my son's wedding table, a ceremony I had helped organize, but for which there was no place for me." Everyone was silent, not out of pity. They just listened. I used to think I didn't deserve a place, that if I loved enough, sacrificed enough, people would automatically reserve a place for me. But no, sometimes we have to create that place ourselves and invite ourselves to sit down. I looked around, warm, sincere faces nodding quietly. Today, I'm no longer waiting for someone to invite me. I'm preparing a feast for myself and inviting everyone who was never called by their name to sit with me. I sat down and raised my glass. Everyone raised their glasses too. To us, the forgotten, who continue to live wonderfully, who continue to love and forgive. The clinking of glasses echoed without a script. The dinner flowed with laughter, whispered stories from the past, and the sound of spoons touching plates. Someone played a light jazz tune. I don't remember the name, but the melody was like streams of water irrigating the dry cracks of my heart. After dinner, Mrs. Davison stood up and looked at me. "Harper, I've never seen you shine like this." I laughed and gently touched her hand. "I've never seen myself like this either." When everyone had left, I stayed behind, clearing the table without feeling tired. I put away the leftovers, washed the dishes, and wiped the table, as I had done 1,000 times before. But today, every movement was gentle, deliberate, without haste, without anguish. I blew out the candles. The room grew dark, but my heart was brighter than ever. I sat down and opened my laptop. My blog, The Invisible Mother, now had over 1,000 followers. Not a huge number, but 1,000 hearts that had once felt invisible, like me. I wrote the last sentence of the new article: we don't need everyone to see us. We just need to be brave enough to see ourselves. I clicked publish, then made myself a cup of tea. I congratulated myself with a slice of apple pie that Mrs. Davison had left. This journey did not end with a tearful reunion. There was no miracle bringing Samuel back with a bouquet of flowers and a public apology. There were no cameras, no applause, just me. The mother who was once banished from her son's life, and then returned wholeheartedly to her own. Love and sacrifice deserve appreciation. But when they are ignored, exploited, or taken for granted, it's time to return to yourself. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean returning. It means letting go to move on for yourself. And finally, that was enough. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your opinion matters. If you like my story, you can encourage me to write more by sending me a donation. Thank you endlessly. Harper.